to our previous shows in podcast form. And we're also up and running on Facebook. Just search for the official page of Radio Caribbean International. Please be sure as well to like and share that with your friends and family. The number to call in, our local number is 452-3046 if you want to tell us what's on your plate today. And you can also message in or call in via WhatsApp from wherever you are in the world. That number is 758-724-0008. You can give us some food for thought. Again, that number 724-0008. Some quick birthday greetings for today, going out to Mr. Francis Springer. Happy birthday to you, sir. We do hope that you're having a fantastic birthday celebration. And also to Miss Genevieve Fitz. Happy birthday to you. And we do hope that you're having a wonderful birthday as well. And a bit of history. But before that, just to point out that we are going to be having an interview in just a bit with one of St. Lucia's leading academics. Actually, he's one of America's leading academics. And he is St. Lucian-born Professor David Williams. He's on island as part of the 50th Caribbean Studies Association conference that's happening up at the Harbor Club. Of course, we're going to have a very wonderful conversation with him in just a bit. But first, some history for today. In the year 1940, Britain completes the miracle of Dunkirk by evacuating 338,226 Allied troops from France via a flotilla of over 800 vessels. In the year 1973, a patent for the automated teller machine, the ATM, was granted to Don Wetzel, Tom Barnes, and George Chastain. 1989 on this day saw Eastern Europe's first partial free elections in 40 years, and that was held in Poland, with the Solidarity Party coming to power. 1989 on this day saw the Tiananmen Square massacre involving Chinese troops clearing the square of student protesters, leading to an unofficial death toll of nearly 1,000 lives. We now move on to our dish of the day. The Daily Dish is brought you the kind compliments of our good friends at Tiles Plus.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. Did all kind of tiles. Come down to Tiles Plus. We also got gasway and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Lance Road in Castries, Bosses Joux Grizzlies, and Slack Street in Dufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Serving now, the Daily Dish.
And welcome back to our program for today, for this rainy Tuesday. Thanks for joining with us, of course. And as I mentioned yesterday, there is that ongoing 50th Caribbean Studies Conference, which is happening right here in St. Lucia. And we spoke about it sometime before that, of course. And in fact, tomorrow, the president of the association will be our guest as well. One of the participants who has decided to be part of this event is none other than Professor David Williams. Dr. Williams is, in fact, a national of St. Lucia and has been a professor at Harvard University since 2006. Currently, he is the Norman Professor of Public Health and Chair of the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. He is also a professor of African and African American Studies and Sociology at Harvard University. His prior faculty appointments were at Yale University, where he spent 6 years, as well as University of Michigan for a period of 14 years. Dr. Williams is the youngest son of the late Mr. and Mrs. Rufus Williams of Mondador Road in Castries, and the younger brother of urban planner Mr. Mervyn Williams of Marisil. He completed his early education at the Castries SDA Primary School and the St. Lucia SDA Academy. He next earned a bachelor's degree from the University of the Southern Caribbean in Trinidad and Tobago, and master's degrees in divinity and public health from Andrews University and Loma Linda University, respectively. He next received a PhD in sociology from the University of Michigan. Dr. David Williams is an internationally recognized authority on social influences on health. He has been invited to keynote scientific conferences in Europe, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, South America, the Caribbean, and across the United States and Canada. The author of more than 500 scientific papers, his research has enhanced our understanding of the way in which race, socioeconomic status, stress, racism, health behavior, and religious involvement can affect physical and mental health. The everyday discrimination scale that he developed is the most widely used measure of discrimination in health studies. He has received numerous honors and awards. He was elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2001, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2007, and the National Academy of Sciences in 2010. He has also received Distinguished Career Contributions awards from the American Sociological Association, the American Psychological Association, the New York Academy of Medicine, and the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the United Kingdom. He was ranked as one of the top 10 most cited social scientists in the world in 2005, as the most cited black scholar in the social sciences worldwide in 2008, and as the most cited scholar in African and African American studies in 2023. In 2014, Thomas Reuters ranked him as one of the world's most influential scientific minds. I know there's lots to read about him, and I'm going to continue doing that because I think it's pretty important. Dr. Williams has been involved in the development of health policy at the national level in the United States. He has served on federal advisory committees and testified in congressional hearings. He has served on 10 committees for the National Academy of Medicine, including the committee that prepared the Unequal Treatment Report. He has also played a visible leadership role in raising awareness levels of the problem of health inequalities and identifying interventions to address them. This includes his service as the staff director of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Commission to Build a Healthier America, and as a key scientific advisor to the award-winning PBS film series Unnatural Causes: Is Inequality Making Us Sick? Dr. Williams has also worked on ethnic inequalities in health with the Toronto Public Health Department, the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, and the Pan American Health Organization. He currently serves on the board of trustees of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation Solidarity Council on Racial Equity, and on the board of the UK's National Health Services Race and Health Observatory. His research has been featured on, or as he has been quoted in the national print media, including the New York Times, Time Magazine, Newsweek, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Jet, Essence, and USA Today. He has appeared on national television in the U.S., including ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, BBC, 60 Minutes, CNN, MSNBC, and the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Al Jazeera, PBS, the Hope Channel, and the Discovery Channel. His TED Talk has been translated into 22 languages and has over 1.9 million views. And in 2020, the government of St. Lucia awarded him with the St. Lucia Medal of Merit Gold and named him a Goodwill Ambassador for St. Lucia for the years 2020 to 2023. And of course, it's our great pleasure that he's in fact our guest here today at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
I am doing well. It's always good to be home. The mangoes are in season. It's always a good time
and
to be home.
You seem to have also brought the rain along with you. So that's a good thing for us as well, certainly. Of course, you're here to participate in this Caribbean Studies Conference during their 50th year. The Caribbean has had a very long legacy of producing academics, perhaps not necessarily staying in the Caribbean, but certainly all over the world. How does it feel to be in that space and interacting with some of your fellow academics?
It's always great to come to what we call it the CSA, Caribbean Studies Association meeting. Many years ago, when I was a faculty at the University of Michigan, I bought a lifetime membership in the organization instead of having to pay a fee every year. Pay it once and you're all set. Because I found it to be a valuable, not only to connect with scholars, but every year the CSA meets in a different Caribbean island or Caribbean basin country. So my first time I ever went to Cuba was as a result of a CSA meeting in Cuba. The first time I ever went to Belize was a result of a CSA meeting there. So it helps you not only to connect with people who are doing work from multiple disciplines. There's social scientists, there's people who study art, there's people who study music, people who study literature, just a broad range of fields. What we all have in common is we are looking at some aspect of Caribbean life. And so it is a wonderful thing. And it's special for me because the meeting is being held in St. Lucia, and so they asked for presentations that could be made that would showcase some contributions of either Sir Arthur Lewis or Derek Walcott. And so for me, I have given lectures where I look at what Sir Arthur Lewis has said about health and what it takes and the relationship between health and economic development. And so my presentation tomorrow morning is exactly on that, a tribute to Sir Arthur Lewis. I must tell you one other thing. I think a high point of my career was when I was invited to the University of Manchester in the UK to give a lecture at University of Manchester. And there is a Sir Arthur Lewis building on that campus. And they knew my connection, so I was able to take a picture, right next to Sir Arthur Lewis building on that campus. And I like to think that some of Sir Arthur Lewis has rubbed off on me and on my siblings, because my father grew up here in St. Lucia, went to the Anglican church's Sunday school every week, and he told us as we were growing up, Sir Arthur Lewis and his brother were his Sunday school teachers. Okay. And my father didn't have a lot of formal education, but was totally brilliant. And I think something rubbed off from sitting at the feet of Sir Arthur Lewis and his brother in the Sunday school class at the Anglican Church.
Yes. It's interesting how, a gentleman who's passed so long, I mean, his work, which he started off back in the 1930s, is still resonating so very much. In fact, my niece who just graduated from Princeton made it a point to go to have a picture taken in front of the Sir Arthur Lewis room, because there's in fact a room named after him. And his work is still quoted so very much, and it's quite often not really appreciated as to how really impactful he has been in terms of changing the world through his study of development economics.
He did. He had an enormous impact, and there is so much we, as in St. Lucia and the Caribbean and the world, can learn as we struggle with issues of health and ensuring good health. And he has written about the strong relationship between good health and economic development, and pointing out that the key things we need to do is not more money, not simply more money just for health care. It's how do we build a healthier nation, and medical care is a piece of that, but a small piece of that. Our healthcare system does a good job of taking good care of us once we get sick. So it functions as a repair shop once we get sick. It's not a driver of how healthy we are in the first place. And that's a point that Sir Arthur Lewis made, and he actually looked at the U.S., data for the U.S. in part of making his point. And just for the audience, I'll tell you a report that came out a year ago for the United States. The United States houses 4% of the world's population. It lives in the U.S. But 48%, almost half of the money spent on medical care annually, is spent in the United States. And how healthy are Americans? We rank at the bottom of the industrialized world on health. The latest report shows 66 countries have longer life expectancy than the U.S. We do more poorly than every other OECD country, and over 25 middle-income countries are doing better than the U.S. in terms of health. So it's not about money and how much money we spend on health. It's about what we do to literally improve the well-being of the population, and not just about providing medical care once we get sick. So I think the insights that he had are still relevant for some of the big crises we face in our society and our world today.
And of course, sometimes that's a hard pill for some politicians to swallow. I think back to his time in the 1950s, helping out the newly formed first independent African country of Ghana. And Kwame Nkrumah, and he had a very hard tussle with him, trying to indicate to him that, look, you're doing this national development plan. You need to, cut out the fat. You need to really keep it about what is needed. Sure. And even some of the messages that, at that time everybody thought, well, Africa has to industrialize. And he was actually saying, well, you guys have a lot of potential with your food. You need to secure food security, which was a strange thing coming from a development economist telling you, hey, this is really what the priority should be before you actually get to that next step. And sometimes we seem not to always capture that, I suppose.
And we miss the things that could be done with governmental policy. One of my colleagues in my department at Harvard is a leader in looking at policies like if you're serving in the United States, there are some government-funded programs that provide meals to kids in school. Well, the quality of that meal will determine the relationship between those kids and obesity, whether they'll become obese or not. So there are lots of ways in which, through policies and government expenditures, we can promote health or we can promote disease. And I think our politicians need to be aware of that and think of the ways in which we can invest. Because if people are healthy, they are more productive workers. And it's a point Sir Arthur Lewis makes. So you get greater economic development from a healthy workforce than from an unhealthy workforce.
It's interesting that you're saying so about some of these simple steps you can take, and even in terms of like school feeding programs. In fact, my dad was on a program over the weekend talking about bananas and the whole issue of why don't we actually have a banana a day policy for our schools in a country like St. Lucia that has so many bananas out there. This issue, of course, of public policy, this obviously takes up a lot of your time in terms of the research that you put forward. And governments are going to be saying, we want to see a change, we want to deliver better, but we have tight budgets, we have these fiscal constraints. Is there, they're always looking for the silver bullet, but are there any such silver bullets that could be used to really change the barometer when it comes to sustainable development, healthcare, education?
So it's a really good question. I think there are good bullets, but the question is, are we going to take a short-term view or long-term view? There's no question if you're looking only at what you're going to spend this year, then if you don't invest in ways that put those young children on a good foundation, there's no immediate negative effect, and you save that money. But if you think of what's going to happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, there is no question that investing in the quality of early childhood education. I'll give you an example. This was a study done in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, a southern state, many years ago. It was called the Abecedarian Project, ABCD, Abecedarian Project. And what they did, they took poor kids, all of them poor, 80% of them black, and they randomized them by the flip of a coin. Half of them went into an early childhood program at birth. The average age of entry was 3 months old. You take these little babies, and you took them to a center where there were professionals there to give them good nutrition, good intellectual stimulation, good high-quality medical care. And the program was just birth through 5. That was it, birth through 5. After 5 years old, both kids are going to school and doing whatever. By age 21, they studied the two groups. The kids who had received the early childhood intervention, birth through 5, better academic performance, better vocational skills, less drug use, better mental health at age 21. By age 35, they followed the two groups, markedly lower levels of what we call cardiometabolic risk, lower levels of blood pressure, lower levels of obesity, lower levels of other risk factors for heart disease, all linked to what those kids were exposed to birth through 5. You've put them on a trajectory for success in life, and not just economic success, they'll be more productive to the society, but also better health. And the evidence, there are multiple other examples of studies like that, of the importance of building a foundation early in life for our kids. The payoff to society is great.
Now, you've spoken about this even right here in St. Lucia. I know you gave a couple of years back a lecture on the MORN specific to those types of interventions, and pointing out that this is the best bang for your buck that you can actually get.
Exactly.
Now, what does that look like, though? I mean, you did mention this program, this early childhood development program that those children were put through. What should be in that mix of what should they be exposed to?
I think it was a combination of trying to ensure that the kids got their screening and their vaccinations that they needed. One. A second, good nutrition. You feed them healthy foods and good intellectual stimulation. There were games from which they would learn and songs that they had. So it was a mixture of some nursing care with some good high-quality early education and nutrition for those kids. So it's not hard, you know.
It's something that a developing country can achieve.
It's something a developing country can achieve, and the benefits for the developing country. If you know, in St. Lucia, we all worry about crime, and crime is a problem, not just here, but within our region. These programs literally are crime reduction strategies, because kids who are engaged in school are less likely to be involved in crime. So that these programs literally reduce, there's one study called the Perry Preschool Study in the United States that took kids 2 years before they started primary school, and they just had educators make home visits to the kids, to the parents, and had the kids enrolled in this preschool program. And they've now studied 40 years later. They, again, randomized controlled trial. They took kids in a public housing project, low-income housing area in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And half of the kids, by a flip of a coin, got the program. The other half, they just followed them over time. 40 years later, those kids who got the program, higher education, higher median income, less involvement with the criminal justice system over their lifetime, less involvement with the social service, like depending on government assistance for help. For every dollar invested, a $17 return to society. So what I'm saying is the science is overwhelming. There's no question that if we can take those steps, we put our youth on a stronger foundation economically as well as health-wise.
Just recently, in fact, I think there's a consultation going on the amendments to the education legislation, the Education Act here in St. Lucia. And one of the proposed amendments is actually reducing the mandatory age to be in school. I think it's right now 5, and I think they're moving it down to 3 to capture another 2 years that individuals do need to be in school. There may be some parents who may say that, you know, sometimes the school doesn't necessarily help the child. It boxes them in, and they would prefer maybe to have a little bit more control. Maybe they would want to keep them at home for longer. What do you say to that, though? What's the science saying?
I think what the science is that good intellectual stimulation early in life is good for children. It does not have to be structured like an 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Activity. So it's not absolutely necessary for the kids to literally be within the 4 walls of a school. But if you could have them run and play, but as part of their daily activities, it includes some intellectual stimulation. It includes some reading and some activities like that. It is good. There's no question that that's a good thing. But it does not have to take the form of a structured, 8 o'clock to 2:30 or 3 o'clock program. So I think that the trick is, as a society and as parents, what can we manage? What can we balance? For some parents, it's good. It's daycare for them. You know, they can go to work and their kids are in good hands. So in some ways, it's a useful a resource in that way. But I wouldn't say it is absolutely necessary for every child. I think if you can create an environment where kids are nonetheless engaged, involved, and interacting with their world, and are receiving, not necessarily in a structured context of 8 hours a day or 7 or 6 hours a day, a classroom, but intellectual stimulation.
When we speak of early childhood development, some things will come in pre-K, daycare. Are there understood differences in terms of what that might entail, like daycare, for instance? I mean, I know that's a big issue in many countries around the world right now that are facing issues of falling fertility rates, people are having children, and some people may say, well, if you had free daycare, that could help some people or entice them to ensure that, hey, the cost of raising a child is possible. But is that the same? Is daycare the same, in your understanding, as early childhood development?
Not necessarily, because not all daycare is intellectually stimulating environment for children. So what I would say is the science is clear that high quality daycare has enormous payoffs and enormous benefits for kind of the social, emotional, intellectual development of kids. But it doesn't have to, it could take place in a home. It doesn't have to be in a structured class with a bunch of kids. It's where a child is afforded the opportunity to develop and to be stimulated by all the things within their society and within their world.
We are speaking with Professor David Williams. He is a professor at Harvard University, professor of public health. And I know our lines are already blinking, so that means we've got some calls coming in. But we're actually due to take a break at this time for our weather report. We're going to do that, end our dish of the day now. And when we come back, we can continue this conversation, maybe delve a little bit more into the issue of crime, as it's so very much topical right now. And, of course, taking some calls. We'll be right back.
This has been The Daily Dish.
One tiles for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tiles for your balcony. Come down to Tiles Plus, satisfaction guarantee. Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus, Tiles Plus. Big tiles with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A+. With all kind of tiles, come down to Tiles Plus. We also glad gasway and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down, don't mind nobody. We got the best tiles on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Jugo Zile, and Slack Street in Dufort. Telephone number 453-7939. Tiles Plus.
Island style, yeah. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. We'll help you make the right choice. Island style, whoa. We got the time that will make you happy. Island style, oh yeah. We make your dream come alive in Island style. We have tiles and thin sets, mixes and ground. Everything you need to sort the house out. For the best price and the latest style, take a little drive down to Island Style Car. We got the time to make you go. We got the time to make you say, yeah. Quality, price, service, choice. It's all at Island Style.
Visit us at our showrooms in Bellarosa, Rodney Bay, on the John Compton Highway, Castries, and behind Ruby's Gas Station on the Library Viewfort Highway. Or call us on 450-452 or 453-TILE. Island Style, Tile and Bath. When you think tile, think Island Style.
And welcome back to our program for today at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. Apologies for not having the 12 p.m. weather report available. I hope you can get that a little later. We are, of course, speaking with Dr. David Williams. He is a St. Lucian-born professor at Harvard University. He's been there since 2006, and he's part, of course, of the group over at Harbor Club right now as part of the 50th Caribbean Studies Association conference that's actually happening, a bringing together of many academics from around the Caribbean and the world, really. And of course, we've been having a lot of conversations about the importance of early childhood development. I want to continue that conversation, but I noticed that we actually seem to be getting some calls coming in. So maybe we could just try to squeeze in some other voices to the mix. Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Yes, good afternoon. The WHO recently published a patient safety rights charter to deal with the issue of patients who suffer avoidable harm when in healthcare settings. I don't know if Dr. Williams could care to speak to that, because we've had incidences in Lucia where patients feel that the medical institution or medical profession was negligent, resulting in harm to the patient. So I don't know if you want to recommend that St. Lucia and other Caribbean islands adopt such a charter at the medical facilities as soon as possible.
All right, thanks for that caller. Thanks very much. Quality of care, patient care, and I mean, it's a huge issue in the United States.
Yes, I don't know the specifics of this situation, so I tend to be careful unless I have all the facts. So I don't know all the facts. But the point that the caller made, I think, is an important one. We certainly want to do all we can in all contexts, including the healthcare context, but that would also apply to other contexts, whether it was an athletic place or a school place where we have kids that we are taking appropriate precautions to ensure that we minimize any negative exposures they might have. So in principle, I think it's a great idea, but I don't know the specifics of the issues he or she is raising.
And it speaks to the issue of health and safety across the board
absolutely.
in so many different spaces.
Health and safety across the life course, from birth, from the cradle to the grave. So do we want to do that? Yes. Is that a good principle for us to have? Absolutely.
The access to, I mean, you're a professor of public health, and it speaks to really that broad sense of health, not just in terms of a medical institution.
Correct.
How you actually protect individuals
Yes.
at the workplace, on the playing field, as you mentioned. Who really gets, I mean, at the U.S. level, there's probably somebody who actually handles that, but who should be setting those policies across all these various sectors? Should it be each sector setting their own, or should there be some sort of an overarching?
That is a really great question. I think what we have in the United States and in other Western industrialized countries, like any country in Europe you look at, we have a system that is divided with different government agencies having responsibility over some specific domain. And actually, a lot of these things are integrated. It would be in our best interest for our children that we think would step back and think strategically, how do we coordinate and work together to develop policies that support the well-being and the good health of all of our children. So is that a good thing for us to do? Absolutely. And unfortunately, it shouldn't be just one government department who thinks about fitness and another department here who thinks about nutrition. How do we coordinate and have an integrated strategy to provide the best foundation so that our children will be successful in life?
One of the things that we've been hearing quite a lot of late, and possibly it's because of our experience coming out of COVID, and is that the issue of crime. And people have been seeing these parallels as to how we tackle it, and the point has been made that crime should be seen more as a public health crisis, a public health issue. In fact, there was a recent meeting, I think, in Trinidad and Tobago on this entire matter, the Caribbean-wide level, and how that is actually effective. But what does that mean when we say crime is a public health issue?
Yeah. It's. I think what people mean when they say that is too often we think of crime as just a criminal justice issue. We think of, okay, we have a crime problem, we need to put more police on the street. We need to give the police more equipment. And yes, I want adequate number of police on the street. I want the police to be well trained and to be able to address the issues. The question is, what can we do to prevent crime before it begins? And the evidence is also clear that we talked about early childhood development programs, that if you can get young children and their parents engaged in good educational activities early in life, a child who is successful in school is markedly less likely to live a life of crime. So that if you can have good early childhood programs and good pathways ensuring these kids flourish and do well in school, they will not become criminals. On average, the evidence is overwhelming that if they are experiencing academic success, they are living a fulfilled life in that context, crime does not have that appeal for them. And so there's a lot that we can do, but it takes coordination, sometimes coordination across sectors of society, where we make this a priority and we collaborate to make this a reality.
You mentioned children and their parents, and I
Yes.
thought that was really, really
Yes.
interesting, of course.
Yes.
Parental education, is that a thing? I mean, should it be something that we should be doing in tandem with early childhood development?
Think of it this way. I got my driver's license here in St. Lucia a long time ago. But before I was allowed to drive a car, I had to take lessons, get facts and information, but also get practice. Parenting is a big task, and I speak as a father of 3. Parenting is a big task. And in our society, there aren't many places that comprehensively are providing good training to helping individuals to be a good, effective parent. And so, yes, if anything we could do to facilitate, strengthen, improve the ability of individuals, I think many parents who are not parenting as optimally, let me put it that way, they're not mean. They are doing the best they know how. They are doing all that they were exposed to when they were growing up. So how could we, even in our schools, have some parenting classes that teaches parents how you can be more effective as a parent? That will not only improve the quality of life of those kids, it will actually be a crime reduction strategy if parents can be more effective.
And it's interesting that you've been raising this from even a health perspective too, because I'm thinking, especially in a place like St. Lucia, you get so many old wives' tales, they're called, if you want to term it that. But more things that are learned by tradition, but not really based on any kind of tested. And these things get passed down, and this is what people use and believe should be the way they raise their children. That's not going to go away on its own, is it?
It is not going to go away on its own, and we have evidence that we can help parents. Some parents think that corporal punishment, spare not the rod, is the only, if you think of the tools that they have to deal with their kid, that's the only tool they have. And I'm not saying the tool cannot be used under certain specific conditions, but it is not a catch-all, and it's not a disciplinary tool to be used in every single context for every single problem. So yes, and that's something our schools could do. In terms of ensuring that, I'm just give the example of you want people to drive a car, they have to get some training. People are going to be a parent, why don't we provide them some training as a society so they can learn about how to be effective as a parent. It will be fulfilling for them in the long run.
But in an environment where we already are struggling with parental involvement, especially for male parental involvement, large proportion of single households, single mother-headed households as well. How then do you actually get the male in particular to be more involved in parenting?
It's a really good question. I wish I could tell you there was a simple magic bullet I could tell you that we should use. I think, though, we need to think of it as a societal problem and not just as a local, this family has the problem. what can we do as a society? What can all of our organizations do as a society? What can churches do, for example, where some men in the church will opt to become extra father, and I put father in quotation marks, to some child in the community that doesn't have a father at home. And so it's the presence of another adult male in that child's life that could make a difference. There are actually programs like that. There are programs like that that have been done through organizations like the Boys Club or other Pathfinders organizations, where kids are linked to another adult. So they have the presence of a male adult in their life, even if they are being raised by a single mother. That can make a difference. What some of the research suggests is that what seems to produce higher risk for kids is kids who are being raised by an unsupported parent.
Okay.
But if they're being raised even by a single parent, but that parent has a grandmother,
A network.
a sister, a
Yeah.
network,
The
someone
village.
else has a village around them, they can do well. So I think that's what we need to think is, how can we provide the needed support for our kids?
And of course, that is even more challenging these days because of our reality of many parents seeking fortune abroad, families ending up in situations where Granny's no longer down the road, Granny's actually in New York. And it becomes a major, major challenge in that regard.
I think that's certainly a major challenge. It's also a challenge where for some low-income families, they really have to work long hours, may even have to work 2 jobs just to scratch to get what they need to keep their kids clothed and fed. So it is a challenge. But again, I think that is a place where other organizations in our society could come in, and I'll put a role, like to pick on churches. There's a lot that religious organizations could do to help to fill the gap and to make a difference and to provide that other adult, other supportive adult within the orbit of that child that research shows will make a difference for outcomes for that child.
We here in St. Lucia, again, it's so difficult to speak empirically because we don't have very much research done, but it appears that there has been a waning of that voluntarism spirit, this idea that, you're going to help out this child even though you don't even know them, but, you see it as your civic duty to be able to make an intervention. And that used to be a thing before, parents would send their children up to somebody in Castries or because this person was a little better off and they believed that they could somehow support their child. This isn't really happening as much, again, in this current society. People are a lot more insular. Is there any hope in terms of reversing any of this?
I think there's always hope. I am an optimist. I think that we need to understand why it is not happening. And part of the reason why it's not happening is that people are stressed and stretched thin as they try to survive in difficult economic times. So there's a sense in which when you have to be working 2 jobs, when you just have to travel so far to your place of employment that you just don't have the time, and people are just trying to survive. So yes, it takes a village. We need to bring back the village. In my day, I remember you could be walking home, and if you didn't behave properly, somebody would tell your parents. It wasn't, your parents didn't have to see you. There was someone else. There were neighbors along the way that would look out for you in a sense, and would provide needed discipline or reach out to your parents about it if you acted in some inappropriate way. So I think it's about creating that village again. And I'm saying realistically, we do have challenges of how pressed for time people are. I think our generation now is more stretched for time than earlier generations were, because there's so much happening and people are trying to stay on top of everything.
And then I'm hearing this, but then you hear again about the good old days, and somebody was raised with 5, 6, 7 children, and I don't know. You speak about the whole issue of family support too. 10-year-old brother can assist with the 1-year-old baby. So you had these types of really large families
Absolutely.
that actually provided some level
Yes.
of support within themselves.
Yes.
Right now, St. Lucia, I think, is at a point where we have one of the lowest fertility rates in the world, really.
Didn't know that.
Barely scratching 2,000 births
Okay.
a year.
Wow.
At this point. Is that? I mean, we're almost facing a developed world problem of challenges in terms of aging.
No, that is a challenge. I was not aware of the statistics, but it's a phenomenon that has taken place around the world to some degree, almost everywhere. In some places, there's like China, there's government policies that are really strongly encouraging or requiring this small number of children. I think we cannot lose sight of the big picture. We want all of our kids, regardless of whether they are your personal biological kids. When all the kids in St. Lucia thrive, then there is benefit for all of us. And I think we have to take this bigger vision to that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers, and we will look out for their kids as an earlier generation did. The neighbors all looked out for you. It wasn't only your parents. You had other, technically weren't aunts and uncles, but they functioned like aunts and uncles in the community looking out for you. And we do need to think of how we get back to this sense of community where we are looking out for the best for all of our children, whether they are your biological children or not. Because if they do well, all of us have a better chance of doing well.
You did mention the basis of community through religious institutions,
Yes.
but what about at the local level, the geographic unit? That seems not to be so strong anymore at all.
Yeah, I think, there are some communities, but I don't think this is widespread even in the developed world, where some communities tend to have like a neighborhood organization. But typically when they do, they're more about focus on reducing crime or something like that,
Right.
than of thinking of how can we support our kids. And I do think we need to have a new appreciation.
We had that tradition here of mothers and fathers groups
Yes.
at the community level.
Yes. So that's the kind of thing that would be helpful, where, what's the saying? It takes a village to raise a child. And that if all of us could resolve that we would be part of that village to help those local children around us, connected to us, or even if they're not personally connected to us, but they are part of our community, and we feel the responsibility. There is a program in the United States, for example, that's called Experience Corps. And why it's called Experience Corps is that it's targeted at retired individuals and recruits them to go to elementary schools to be supports for the elementary school teachers. And what the research has documented is that those programs improve school discipline, improves academic performance of the kids, and improve the health, mental health, physical health, cognitive well-being of those retired elderly who are now engaging. And I think most of them have some minimum number of hours per week that you need to work, and it's typically like about 6 to 8 hours a week, so it isn't like a full-time job, but you go to the school and you're an assistant to the teacher, and you help those kids, and it's a win-win situation. The evidence shows the health and cognitive function of the retired individuals improves, and the kids also do better in school, and there's better class discipline and so on, and it's a support for the teacher.
Wonderful intergenerational exchange.
Yes, and it's called Experience Corps.
Experience Corps. That's a nice one. And I guess in terms of even the aging policy that we as a country should have, that could certainly fit in as one of the measures to take on. Coming back to, of course, a bit of some of the research that you've been working on over the years, though, and the state of the black race, quote unquote. How are things looking for the average black person in America right now?
I'll share with you two statistics that illustrate the progress and lack thereof that we see in the United States. In 2018, if you look at the income, median household income in the United States, the median household income for black households was 59 cents for every dollar that white households earn. So that's the black-white gap in income, 59 cents to the dollar. What's striking about that number in 2018, that's identical to the black-white gap in income in 1978. And I picked 1978 because 1978 was the peak year of the narrowing of the black-white gap in income as a result of the anti-poverty policies. There was a war on poverty in the U.S. in the 60s and early 70s, and there was a civil rights movement which opened more opportunities. It was worse than that. It got to 59 cents in back then, and then in 2018, it is still 59 cents. Was it stuck by 59 cents throughout that time? No. Reaganomics was not good to the black community. And it fell throughout the era of Ronald Reagan's presidency. And it was not until 1996, midway into the Clinton administration, it got back up to 59 cents. And it's a penny up and down since then. So the point is, in America right now, there are movements on the political right that are opposed to any diversity programs, any programs that would help disadvantaged populations, because they feel that whites are now being discriminated against and whites are now being hurt. The actual numbers show that we have made less progress in narrowing the racial gaps in income and education and health than most Americans think. Most Americans think that blacks are now disadvantaged, blacks are doing better. And in fact, that's not the reality. I'll give you one other statistic. I do a lot of work in the health field, so I'll pick a statistic from the health field. In mid-1960s, 2.9%, just about 3% of physicians were black. Today, 5% of physicians are black. So we went from just almost 3% to 5%. Most people think we have made all these dramatic blacks about 16% of the population.
And this includes immigrants, recent immigrants from Africa
this includes all,
and West Indies.
Black. Yes, that includes them.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my point is...
In a population of about, what, 17% black?
Yes, the population about 17% black and about 20%, 19-20% Hispanic or Latino and 6% Latino. So where have we seen dramatic success and improvement? As a result of what was called affirmative action policies. This was policies that would give an extra hand to those who were disadvantaged. We've seen it for women. So let's go back to the mid-1960s. 7% of students in medical school were female across the United States. Today it's 50% every year, between 49 and 51%. The policies, those of what we call affirmative action policies, were for minorities and women. They have worked better for women than they have for minorities. Most of the women who have benefited have been white. So the great beneficiaries of affirmative action policies in America have been white households. The greatest opposition to affirmative action policies in America are white households. Because you see affirmative action, they think it's helping the black people, it's helping the Hispanics, it's helping the Native American kids. And it was for minorities and women. And so you open the doors, those white young women were able to walk through the doors. They've gotten a good education, they've gotten a good foundation, they could take advantage of the opportunity. And one of the problems that has happened with blacks and Native Americans and Latinos in the United States, we have opened the doors, but we haven't created the opportunity. It's not enough to open the doors. You can't bring someone to the beginning of a race and they have been shackled with chains and they still have the shackles on their feet and says, I've put you at the starting line, you're now free to run with everybody else. And there are people who have been training for months and years but you have been shackled, and the shackles are still on your feet. And we say, but we've put you at the beginning of the race. You need to be doing just fine. So I think there's a limited understanding in the United States, and unfortunately, there are powerful movements, typified by Trump and his support, that really would like to roll back the clock. If you look at laws that have been passed in the state of Florida or Texas, that really are trying to roll back the clock on many of the steps towards equity and equality that we've made in the United States. So it's a troubling time in America right now, honestly.
Pretty gloomy.
Yes, it is.
I then speak to this is the world's leader from a geopolitical perspective. Should the rest of the world, in particular regions where you've got majority people of African descent, how should they look forward to, how should they pivot themselves to deal with policies that would perhaps not really be beneficial to them at the end of the day?
It's a really big question for both what nations would do, what us as individuals should do. Yes, I grew up here in St. Lucia, but I have lived most of my life in the United States. I certainly do work focused on trying to ensure equity and justice for all in my work. But as people keep moving backwards, what keeps me going and what keeps me hopeful is for me to remind myself that even the doors that I have walked through and the success that I have gained in the United States, there are people of an earlier generation, Martin Luther King's generation and those before him, who literally gave their lives to open the doors that I'm walking through. So I can't just say, I've made it and I've done it my way, and not think of the sacrifices that others made to open those doors. And so I see myself as under obligation to continue to struggle, to continue to fight, to use my voice whenever I can, to be an advocate for justice and for equity. To me, it's the least that I can do given the opportunities that I have had and that many others have not had those opportunities, even though they were born and raised in the United States. Because there's still all of these structures of racism that persist in America.
And it's interesting that you're raising that in terms of your own journey. I think back to the beginning of the conversation with Sir Arthur Lewis, his parents being adherents to Marcus Garvey, and that drove him, no doubt, in terms of the work that he did in recognition of that influence there. Dr. David Williams, it's never enough time. It's always a pleasure to have you on island and to be able to share with us and impart with us your immense wealth of knowledge and perspectives and advice as well to St. Lucia and to the Caribbean and the world by extension. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Keep up the great work you are doing.
Wonderful. And thanks for joining us here at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. Of course, thanks to Dr. Williams once again. And we're going to be back again tomorrow. We'll still be discussing some stuff coming out of the Caribbean Studies Association conference. Hope you can join us for that as well. Have a great one.